What you know about DMT is a lie. Let me guess, you think that your brain produces DMT, that when you're born, a flood of DMT washes over your little baby brain. Your dreams are because your pineal gland releases DMT when you sleep, and when you die, your body is once again flooded with DMT. Yeah, all that's and I'm sure you're in your feelings right now, hurt that someone is ruining your little psychedelic fairy tale, but today I just don't care. Stop believing in your and let's get down to the science of your drug on brains. But before we go on, I need you to like and subscribe. The endogenous DMT hypothesis really took off with Rick Strassman's 2001 book, DMT, the Spirit Molecule. Strassman speculated that the pineal gland might produce DMT and release it during birth, death, dreams, and mystical experiences. But Strassman presented this as pure speculation. There was zero evidence backing his claim. Unfortunately, the psychedelic community ran with it. The idea spread through books, documentaries, podcasts, and social media until it became an accepted truth. Except there's one problem. We still don't have evidence that it's true. And the more we learn, the less plausible it becomes. Let's start with what we actually know about endogenous DMT, which is DMT being produced or found within the body. In 2013, a study detected DMT in rat pineal glands. The study gets cited constantly as proof that the pineal gland produces DMT, but let's look at what they actually found. They detected DMT at concentrations in the nanogram per gram range. Nanograms, that's incredibly tiny amounts. We're talking trace levels. Then in 2019, another study was published that found DMT in rat brains. But again, we're talking incredibly minute trace amounts, orders of magnitude far below what would be needed for any glimmer of a psychoactive effect. In humans, we've detected DMT in human biological fluids, blood, urine, cerebral spinal fluid, but at trace levels. But detection of DMT does not equal biosynthesis. And biosynthesis does not equal functional significance. Those are two incredibly important concepts to understand. Just because we can detect a molecule doesn't mean the body is intentionally producing it for a specific purpose. And just because the body might be producing tiny amounts doesn't mean those amounts do anything. Here's an analogy. Your body produces trace amounts of formaldehyde as a metabolic byproduct. We can detect it, it's being biosynthesized, but that doesn't mean your body is a formaldehyde factory with formaldehyde playing some important physiological role. It's just there, a metabolic accident. And speaking of metabolic accidents, let's talk about how DMT might be getting produced, if it's getting produced at all. The enzyme theoretically capable of producing DMT is called indolethylmine N-methyltransferase. INMT. INMT takes tryptamine and adds methyl groups to it, potentially creating DMT. In science, we call INMT a promiscuous enzyme. It doesn't specifically target tryptamines to make DMT. It methylates lots of different substrates. It's not a precision tool. It's more like an exhausted doorman at a club just slapping methyl group wristbands on whatever comes by. Your body has tryptamine floating around all the time. It has SAM, which is its methyl donor. So some DMT formation could purely be incidental, random, accidental. It could just be what INMT does to substrates that happen to be available with no particular purpose or function. But let me play into your silly little fantasy and say yes, the body is producing DMT. Let's give the hypothesis every benefit of the doubt, but we still have one massive problem. It's the concentration. When people smoke DMT, a typical breakthrough dose is 30 to 50 milligrams. That's a lot of DMT, and you're delivering it directly to your lungs where it rapidly enters your bloodstream and crosses the blood-brain barrier. Even with this extremely efficient delivery method, smoking, which bypasses first-pass metabolism and gets DMT to your brain within seconds, you need substantial concentrations to produce any psychoactive effects. Now let's look at what we're detecting endogenously. Nanograms per gram. Let's do the math. The human brain weighs about 1,400 grams. If we generously assume the same concentrations found in rat brains apply to humans, which is already a stretch, we're talking micrograms total. Maybe that's thousands of times less than what you'd actually need. And we haven't even started talking about the blood-brain barrier, dilution factors, and the fact that any DMT in your blood needs to actually cross into your brain in sufficient concentrations. And we haven't even talked about metabolism by MAO enzymes that rapidly break down DMT. The concentration problem alone makes the endogenous DMT hypothesis impossible. Now let's talk about the pineal gland because it's overrated. The pineal gland is tiny. In humans, it weighs about 100 milligrams. That's 0.1 grams. It's the size of a grain of rice. Let's do some basic math. A breakthrough DMT dose is 30 to 50 milligrams, and the pineal gland weighs 100 milligrams. So you're asking this tiny little gland to produce and store amounts of DMT that represent a significant size of its own mass, then just release it all at once? And we haven't even established that it even produces DMT at all. Remember, the rat study found trace amounts of DMT in the pineal gland, not stores, not high concentrations ready for release, just traces. The pineal gland primarily produces melatonin. That's its known function. It regulates circadian rhythms. The evidence for this is overwhelming. Now, the evidence that it's simultaneously running a side hustle as a DMT dealer for your brain? Zero. Non-existent. Oh, Zeus, but isn't the pineal gland the third eye, the seat of the soul? Just because wackos say that doesn't make it true. And also, biology doesn't care about your mystical projections, bro. The pineal gland is a melatonin-producing endocrine gland. Stop with your Now let's talk about the nonsense of DMT flooding the brain at death. Let me be absolutely clear. There is zero direct evidence that DMT is released at death. For the DMT flooding your brain thing to actually work, you would need massive DMT production, which we have no evidence of, storage of significant amounts of DMT, yet again, no evidence, a release mechanism triggered by dying, and no mechanism has been identified, inhibition of MAO enzymes so that DMT isn't immediately broken down, no evidence, and efficient delivery to the brain at concentrations sufficient for psychoactive effects, which is physically impossible. You need all of those things to be true simultaneously, and we have zero evidence of any of them happening at all. All that DMT being released at death is just made up, and yet you're out here still believing it. Let's dig deeper into the monoamine oxidase problem, because this alone would end the endogenous DMT BS. Monoamine oxidase, MAO. It's an enzyme that rapidly metabolizes DMT in your body. It breaks it down within minutes. This is why you can't just eat DMT and trip. Your stomach and liver contain massive amounts of MAO that destroy the DMT before it ever reaches your brain. This is why ayahuasca works. It combines DMT-containing plants with plants that contain MAO inhibitors. You need to block MAO for oral DMT to be psychoactive. So if your body is producing trace amounts of DMT endogenously, what happens to it? It gets immediately metabolized by MAO. Your brain is filled with MAO. Your blood is filled with MAO. Any DMT produced would instantly be broken down. For endogenous DMT to accumulate to psychoactive levels, you need either massive overproduction to overwhelm MAO capacity, or you need simultaneous inhibition of MAO. And stress does not inhibit MAO. And dying does not inhibit MAO. There's no evidence for either of these things occurring naturally. For any of this to be true, you would need a somehow undetected system that produces massive amounts of DMT and inhibits MAO and delivers it efficiently to the brain. It just doesn't exist. It's fairy tale. Some people claim that endogenous DMT is released during REM sleep, creating dreams. This hypothesis is even more garbage than the death hypothesis. We have extensive research on dreaming. We know a lot about what's happening neurologically during REM sleep. We know about the neurotransmitters involved, and we know about the deactivation of the prefrontal cortex and the hyperactivation of emotional centers. None of this research has found evidence for DMT's involvement in dreaming. We don't need DMT to explain dreams. We have perfectly good explanations based on established neurotransmitter systems and neural network activity. Okay guys, just think about this from a psychonaut perspective. If DMT were being released every night during dreams, we'd expect dreams to feel like DMT trips, but they don't. Dreams are weird, yeah, but not like smoking 50 mg of DMT weird. And you know what I'm talking about. So if there are trace amounts of DMT in the body, what are we actually detecting? Most likely, it's some combination of enzyme byproducts, INMT doing what it does to available substrates, producing tiny amounts of DMT as metabolic noise. Dietary sources. DMT is present in many plants. We eat plants. Some of that DMT gets absorbed and may appear in blood and tissue. But detection does not mean endogenous production. Gut bacteria. Our microbiome can produce all sorts of compounds. Some bacteria might produce trace amounts of DMT or related compounds. Again, this shows up in our system, but doesn't mean our cells are intentionally making it. Also, scientific issues. Some studies may be detecting compounds that look like DMT on certain analytical techniques, but aren't actually DMT. False positives and identification errors are real possibilities when you're looking for trace amounts of a compound. Once again, trace detection does not mean biosynthesis, and biosynthesis does not mean functional significance. Let's recap why the endogenous DMT hypothesis is There's an evidence gap. We have trace detections in animals, minimal data in humans, no evidence for functionally significant production. And there's accidental noise. INMT is promiscuous. DMT production might be chemical noise, not purposeful. Concentration problem. Detected amounts are orders of magnitudes below psychoactive thresholds. You need milligrams for effects. We're detecting nanograms. Pineal gland problems. It's too small. It produces melatonin, not meaningful amounts of DMT. The death hypothesis. We have zero direct evidence that any of this is even true. We have no mechanisms, and it would require a simultaneous production of DMT and MAO inhibition, which is just implausible. MAO destroys DMT. Rapid metabolism means any trace reduction gets immediately broken down. No plausible mechanisms for accumulation. And dreams don't need DMT. We already understand dreaming based on decades of established research. And also, dreams don't feel like DMT trips. And also, just if our bodies were flooded with a potent psychedelic at death, this would be the most dramatic neurochemical event in human physiological history. We would have detected it by now. And the fact that we haven't, despite looking for decades, it should tell you something. Look, science is always open to new evidence, but the burden of proof is on those claiming this endogenous DMT hypothesis is real. And this hypothesis, it's had decades to accumulate evidence, and it hasn't. So when someone tells you your pineal gland produces DMT or your DMT floods your brain when you die, show them this video. Your brain is mysterious and beautiful. It produces consciousness, creativity, mystical experiences, and altered states without any DMT involved at all. And that's actually far more amazing than this endogenous DMT stuff. Ugh. And I know some of you people in the comments are still going to believe your stupid fairy tale, but know that you're believing a lie. What you think is not true. You're living in a fantasy. For more deep dives into psychedelic science, then follow on Patreon. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I read all the comments. Yes, even the weird, ridiculous ones. I still read those. So continue to comment and like and subscribe. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Your Drug on Brains. Also, follow on X, TikTok, and Instagram at Tipado. Tipado.